Yesterday, I tried to analyze Sri Aurobindo's reply, answer to a very, very difficult question. A question not only difficult for philosophy but also for those of us who want to live in this life, which is, if God is all that kind and merciful and all powerful, why is there so much pain and suffering and evil in this world? Now, since we are working under some kind of limitation of time, I have another 4 days, and I have not even touched the halfway point in the book. I don't want to go on from where I stopped yesterday. That was a kind of a reply which should give you the outlines of what Sri Aurobindo has done in the life divine. So we now move on to other parts of the book. So Narad tries to explain to Savitri's mother that Savitri has come down here for a very great work that has to be done on earth, and as a human mother, her concern for her future is only natural. But in the cosmic drama that Savitri's life is going to embody, that concern has no place. Leave it to her, she says, and her destiny to fight whatever battle she has to fight. This is the word of consolation, implying ultimately everything probably is going to be well, because Savitri is not just an ordinary human being. She has come here to do something which needs to be done for the evolutionary manifestation of the divine on earth. It is not something very small. It's not like bringing about a social change or an economic change or change in institutions. It is something much greater than that. And the problem that Savitri is going to confront is the problem that we all confront, the problem of negation, the problem of death, the problem of the inconscient still throttling us and trying to say, not here on this earth, in this world, can you reach fulfillment of life. If you want fulfillment of life, you have to abandon this world. Now, it is not for nothing that Shankaracharya and Buddha and others preached this path of escape, because honestly speaking, if someone hasn't made the discovery that Sri Aurobindo has made, then really there is no way of changing this world. To be very honest, Shankaracharya was absolutely right, Buddha was absolutely right. You can't change this world with the powers that the mind has got. To change this, you need a greater power. And until Sri Aurobindo came along, people didn't even realize that there was this greater power available to man. So in one sense, when people say Sri Aurobindo was a great dreamer, Sri Aurobindo was a great utopian, you don't know whether what he is saying will ever come true. There is some basis for this general incredulity, as you can describe it, when nobody has so far succeeded. How can Sri Aurobindo speak with this ring of confidence in his tone that this is bound to happen? Man is going to walk this earth like God and find terrestrial perfection here. The reason being, as I said, she made this discovery the 40 years that he spent in Pondicherry. Not 40 years, ordinary kind of 40 years, but 40 years after he had acquired the highest siddhis in yoga. He further went to this exploration. 40 years he didn't come out. For many years he didn't mix freely with people. It was not because he was being inconvenienced. He just wanted to retire. He wanted to rest. Probably many of us do not know that even in his so-called retirement, he used to spend 9 to 10 hours writing replies to the letters sent by his devotees, mainly from the ashram and also from other places. It is not for his convenience. He was engaged all the time in some massive kind of work that many people had no idea about what he was trying to do, what he was trying to achieve. And so it is this that has to be borne in mind, and people like you and me who go around talking about Sri Aurobindo and the mother should also learn to put up with the incredulity people express. They say, oh, this can't be true. Well, there are many people who will say we have great regard for all saints. Sri Aurobindo is one of the saints. We accept him, but all that you are talking about, man will change, man has to change, a new world of perfection is going to descend here. This we find, is too difficult, because nobody in our tradition, whether it's a Vaishnava tradition or Shaiva tradition or Shakta tradition, nobody has ever talked about it. I think my suggestion is you just give a smile, a knowing smile, because as Sri Aurobindo himself said, belief will not be until the work is done. Until the work is done, belief, there shall be no belief. But we have to believe because we are committed to this mission that Sri Aurobindo took up in life. And so, in this great work, Narad says to Savitri's mother, you have no place. Now, this long passage I must read because at night, when I finished and go back to my room, I feel very guilty that I don't read enough lines from Savitri. But if I read these lines from Savitri, I can't do the other things I want to do. It's a kind of congested thing, there's so much to do, there's so little time to do it in. But this particular passage that I'm going to read out has another significance. This is the last passage that Sri Aurobindo dictated before he left his body. A few days before he left his body, this was the passage he dictated to Sri Nirodbaran. So, in its own right, it has a special significance as poetry. As a link in the story also, it is very valuable. Since there are other things for us to talk about today, I will not comment on what I am going to read. I'll just read it slowly so that you see what Narad is trying to say. Queen, page 460, 460. He is addressing Savitri's mother who has raised this question. Queen, strive no more to change the secret will. Time's accidents are steps in its vast scheme. There is a secret will, not only behind the life of an individual, but behind the life of nations, behind the life of countries. Time's accidents are steps in its vast scheme. Bring not thy brief and helpless human tears across the fathomless moments of a heart that knows its single will and God's as one. It can embrace its hostile destiny. It sits apart with grief and facing death, affronting adverse fate, armed and alone. In this enormous world, standing apart, in the mightiness of her silent spirit's will, in the passion of her soul of sacrifice, her lonely strength facing the universe. Affronting fate asks not man's help nor God's. Sometimes one life is charged with earth's destiny. It cries not for succor from the time-bound past. Alone she is equal to her mighty task. Intervene not in a strife too great for thee, a struggle too deep for mortal thought to sound. Its question to this nature's rigid bounds, when the soul fronts nude of garbs the infinite, its too vast theme of a lonely mortal will, pacing the silence of eternity. As a star, uncompanioned, moves in heaven, unastonished by the immensities of space, traveling infinity by its own light, the great are strongest when they stand alone. A God-given might of being is their force, a ray from self-solitude of light the guide. The soul that can live alone with itself meets God. Its lonely universe is their rendezvous. A day may come when she must stand unhelped on a dangerous brink of the world's doom and hers, carrying the world's future on her lonely breast, carrying the human hope in a heart-left soul, to conquer or fail on a last desperate verge, alone with death and close to extinction's edge. Her single greatness in that last dire scene must cross alone a perilous bridge in time and reach an apex of world destiny where all is won or all is lost for man. In that tremendous silence, lone and lost, of a deciding hour in the world's fate, in her soul's climbing beyond mortal time, when she stands soul with death or soul with God, apart upon a silent, desperate brink, alone with herself and death and destiny, as on some verge between time and timelessness, when being must end or life rebuild its base, alone she must conquer or alone must fall. No human aid can reach her in that hour. No armored God stands shining at her side. Cry not to heaven, for she alone can save. For this the silent force came mission down. In her the conscious will took human shape. She only can save herself and save the world. O Queen, stand back from that stupendous scene. Come not between her and her hour of fate. Her hour must come, and none can intervene. Think not to turn her from her heaven-sent task. Strive not to save her from her own high will. Thou hast no place in that tremendous strife. Thy love and longing are not arbiters there. Leave the world's fate and her to God's sole guard. Even if he seems to leave her to her lone strength, even though all falters and falls and sees an end, and the heart fails and only her death and night, God-given her strength can battle against doom, even on a brink where death alone seems close, and no human strength can hinder or can help. Think not to intercede with the hidden will. Intrude not twixt her spirit and its force, but leave her to her mighty self and fate. Because Narad emphasizes, you as the human mother of Savitri do not probably know this, but he says, she is for this the silent force came mission down. She is the executive force of the divine. She is the Shakti of the divine who has come down in human form. In her the conscious will took human shape. What is called the Chit Shakti, the consciousness force of the divine, has come down as Savitri, taken the human form, and she knows exactly what she is doing. She has to confront death as a personal problem. If you have not confronted it as a personal problem, how can you solve the problem for humanity? That is why the highest power which came down has to tackle death as a personal problem. Because she is here to conquer death, and she is not doing it for herself, she is doing it for mankind. And therefore, do not let your sentimentality, your love of a human mother come between her and the mission of her life. Now, this is the end of Book 6. Book 7 is called the Book of Yoga, and that's about 100 pages long. This is Savitri's Yoga. In fact, I've always been telling my audiences that in this book there are 3 yogas. One is Sri Aurobindo's yoga. In fact, there are 4, not just 3. Sri Aurobindo's yoga, that is described in Ashwapati's yoga. And the mother's yoga, you see the mother's yoga, That is described here as Savitri's yoga. There is a third yoga here, that is the yoga of the earth. Evolution, what you call evolution, is this impersonal yoga that the whole earth consciousness is performing. And of course, the fourth yoga is your yoga and my yoga. That also is described in various ways here. Now, when we are dealing with the first three books, I put a great deal of emphasis and tried to on these books and tried to relate them to Sri Aurobindo's own life. How Savitri grew out of Sri Aurobindo's own personal quest, and how, as Sri Aurobindo always used to say, my life has not been lived on the surface for people to observe and write about. It has been lived in the depths of my consciousness. So what is it Sri Aurobindo was trying to do? What kind of a person was he? What was his quest and so on? So I try to relate it to Sri Aurobindo and Ashwapati's yoga here, and what exactly Ashwapati seeks and what exactly Sri Aurobindo seeks are identical. So in one sense, therefore, Ashwapati is Sri Aurobindo, and Ashwapati's daughter Savitri is the mother who was in the ashram. But human mind is very curious. They say, how can Ashwapati be Sri Aurobindo? Ashwapati was a king, Sri Aurobindo was not a king. In fact, he was in the British jail for a year. So how can he be a king? So it's not. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to correspond like that. It's not kind of literal. It's a kind of spiritual autobiography, and so is the story of Savitri here. Savitri's tapasya that we are going to talk about. Savitri's yoga, to which Sri Aurobindo devotes about 100 pages, is also, in one sense, captures the secret of the mother's yoga for the earth consciousness. Now, I do make it a point to refer, however briefly, to Sri Aurobindo's life. I didn't spend much time talking about his life in England because you are all, if anybody, you must be the authority on Sri Aurobindo's life in England. Cambridge is here, Manchester is here, London is here. And being Gujaratis, you must at least be semi-authorities on his life in Baroda. So, but I did talk about his life in Baroda and subsequently how his quest for India's freedom and how his quest for a solution to India's problems, as he advanced in yoga, got transformed into his concern for humanity's future, not just India's future, but humanity's future, as I've been emphasizing. There is no problem which is exclusively India's problems. They are all human problems, and these problems have Indian manifestations, British manifestations, and so on. And so Sri Aurobindo gave up this narrow quest, and his quest became very wide, and his quest became a quest for human fulfillment on earth. Now, after having said that, I have to say something about, now that we are talking about Savitri, I have to say something about the mother. But I said to myself, if I keep saying this, when do I finish the remaining books? I've been telling our friend Dhirubai, see, I'm using Savitri as a kind of springboard to acquaint people with Sri Aurobindo's vision, what he was trying to do, what he was trying to achieve. If you really want to do justice to Savitri, then these 15 days are not sufficient. I have been doing Savitri in the ashram for the last 9 years. I have not yet reached the midpoint. I have just crossed the midpoint. I don't know, it will take me into the 21st century before I conclude it, because it's a book on which Sri Aurobindo himself spent 50 years. And we shouldn't grudge spending a few years reading it, trying to understand it. So I will not be attempting by any means to exhaust it or to touch every aspect of it, but what I am concerned more about giving you a general view on Sri Aurobindo, what he was trying to do, because I personally believe that it is very important for all of us who have faith in Sri Aurobindo, who believe in Sri Aurobindo, to know what exactly is distinctive about Sri Aurobindo. Is he one of the thousands of saints that India has always produced? Each saint, of course, is in his own way distinct. I am not suggesting that Sri Aurobindo is the only saint who is distinct. I mean to say, each saint is distinct in his own way, but we should know in what ways Sri Aurobindo was distinctive, what was his central quest, what he was trying to achieve, and so on. And that is why, I make it a point not just narrowly confine myself to one particular book or text. And Savitri lends itself to all these, sorties that I make from the book outside. And today I'm going to talk about Savitri very briefly, and Savitri and her relationship to the mother. As you all know, just as there is hardly any resemblance to Ashwapati's life and uh, Sri Aurobindo's life on the external part, because here Ashwapati is a king who never had children, and he performs the yajna. That is the story in the Mahabharata. Savitri in Mahabharata, of course, is the daughter of Ashwapati, born in response to Ashwapati's prayer to the Supreme Mother. But here, as you know, the mother that we knew in Pondicherry was born in France, grew up in France, in the Western environment, and she went through experiences of life which are very, very typical to somebody growing up in Europe. And she came fairly late, in one sense, to India in 1914 for the first time, met Sri Aurobindo in 1914. But already, if you read her life, she had established a contact with Sri Aurobindo. And in 1926, she came back again in 1920, and in 1926, one day Sri Aurobindo called all the disciples in the ashram. And that day, even today, is celebrated as Siddhi Day. And Sri Aurobindo is a very strange in many ways. When you have Siddhi, you go out with band baja and announce that you have Siddhi. But Sri Aurobindo said, I had my Siddhi today, from tomorrow I will just not be available to whoever wants to come and meet me. I will only meet people twice or three times a year. That was, he just retired into seclusion to concentrate on the work that he had undertaken. But by that time, on that day, 26 people had already joined the ashram as Sri Aurobindo's disciples, and they were wondering what would happen to them. And then Sri Aurobindo pushed to the front the mother and said, she will be from now on your guide, your guru, and you have to turn to her for everything. And people were quite surprised. They thought, mother may be a senior sadhika, maybe, somebody like them. But they were quite surprised, and many people in the ashram, you can, if you are a Gujarati or if you are from Karnataka or Tamil Nadu and so on, you recognize God only if he looks Indian. How can God be French? How can God be African? And so, how can God be Japanese or Chinese? God has to be Indian. Well, God did come in the Indian form in a time when India hardly traveled outside the confines of India. Now Indians are everywhere. So God also must have the freedom to come in other forms as well. So these were some of the questions. Many Indians were asked these questions. And the little book called The Mother, that you must have all seen, was partly written as a reply to these questions. Who is the mother? Who is this? Is she just another sadhika? What is she? What is her position and what is her place? And Sri Aurobindo makes it very clear that she is basically his Shakti. Shakti is the one who takes the power and executes it. Just as, in my judgment, Vivekananda was the Shakti of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Many people say, what do you mean, Sharadamani Devi was there? She was there. But the actual execution of it, taking it out into the world, was done by Swami Vivekananda. And the Shakti is not, that doesn't have to be masculine and feminine. These are all our conceptions. Shakti has to be feminine and Purusha has to be masculine. Because our language is so dumb that we have to impose the sex distinctions, everything that we can see. God, male or female. Look, God doesn't have to be either male or female. Male and female is a part of the human conception, human perception. And there can be a reality which is beyond this, but it doesn't occur to us. But anyway, the point I am trying to make is that the mother herself has said in one place that, without him, I do not exist, and without me, he is unmanifest. That is the relationship they had, in the consciousness. And Mother and Sri Aurobindo may have many times said, our consciousness is identical, our search is identical, and so on. But since we don't have very much time to establish thesis, I will take another route to this, to establish or to indicate to you the position that the mother had occupied in the hearts of the sadhaks in the ashram. In the ashram, there was a very well-known sadhak. Many of you probably have heard his name, and called Kapali Shastri. He was a Tamil Brahmin, and he was brought up in a Brahmin family. Right from the age of 4, he was introduced to Sanskrit. By the age of, he was 8 or 10, I don't know how many times he had read Ramayana and Mahabharata in the original. And he had taken to tantric worship, Sri Vidya worship, various kinds of mantric upasanas and so on. And he had a teacher who primarily taught him Sanskrit and various other vidyas, a man called Vasishta Ganapati Muni. And he was a real Rishi of those days. He was lived mainly in the 19th century. And with his group of students, he would just wander from one village to another village, and the students had to wash his clothes, cook his food, and do things of this kind. And that is how they learned all the vidyas. Now this Vasishta Ganapati Muni is remembered primarily because he discovered Raman Maharshi. Raman Maharshi was a small boy in a langot, in the precincts of a temple in South India. They said must be a beggar boy. But since this man had this spiritual intuition, immediately recognized this is a self-realized boy, although he is 16. And from that day, Venkat Raman became Raman Maharshi, and he became known all over the world. And Vasishta Ganapati Muni was a very close disciple of Raman Maharshi. And this Kapali Shastri, therefore, also became a disciple of Raman Maharshi. And as I said, he had spent a lifetime doing all kinds of sadhanas, traditional sadhanas, upasana, mantra, vidya, all these. He's also written commentaries on some of the texts of Raman Maharshi. Raman Maharshi wrote very little, but he did write a few things, and it is Vasishta Ganapati Muni who has written commentaries on all these things. And one occasion there is an incident, this Kapali Shastri was writing commentaries, and he got stuck at a particular verse. He didn't know exactly how to proceed. And he writes that one day Raman Maharshi said, I understand you got stuck at a particular verse. Is that so? He said, yes. Then why don't you begin work tomorrow? How do we begin work? He said, tomorrow you come and sit in front of me and start writing. And he will start everything will start flowing. And he came and sat in front of Raman Maharshi. Raman Maharshi was simply gazing at him. And there it was, Kapali Shastri writing commentary after one verse and another verse. In 2-3 sittings he completed the whole thing. That is the kind of man he was, and he had received the grace of one of the greatest rishis produced by modern India. But towards the very late, about 25 years before he passed away, he realized that his sadhana was more in Sri Aurobindo's line than in Raman Maharshi's line. And so with Raman Maharshi's blessings, he left Raman Ashram and came and stayed in Sri Aurobindo Ashram, and that's where he died. And M.P. Pandit, whose name you must all have heard, was Kapali Shastri's chela. He groomed him right from his early childhood. Now M.P. Pandit writes in one place that a few months before Kapali Shastri died, he was lying on his bed and M.P. Pandit was nursing him. So he asked him a question. He said, Shastriji, you have spent a whole lifetime doing nothing but sadhana, aradhana, upasana, and most of them all along traditional lines. Then you had the blessings of one of the greatest modern rishis that India has seen, which is Raman Maharshi. What has been your reward? What has been your siddhi? What did you gain? What did you gain by living a life like this? The old man who was lying down on his bed, that suddenly he sprang up and sat down and held both his hands like this and said, the greatest siddhi of my life is that now I know who the mother is. The greatest discovery is because most people think she is a French woman. That's all. But I know who the mother is. And he realized that she was the very supreme, highest power of the divine come down on earth. I'm telling you this story because the appearances can be deceptive. She was French, and she had already married. She had a son. We have these things. How can God be married? How can God have children? I think it's a stupid human mentality that there are certain things about human life which are inherently non-sacred. Is motherhood not sacred? Why should somebody who is a mother, it's a very sacred thing, that to be a mother is a very sacred thing. Do they automatically, just because they become mother, they become unholy? What is it? What is your ideas? Indians had these problems. Many Indians had. How can mother be there? She is already married once. She has a child, and as if God. I had a friend, Christian friend, whose life's ambition was to convert me and make me a Christian. He spent many nights trying to do this. And he used to tell me, look, I almost became a Hindu once. Almost, he said. What happened then? He said, I was a great admirer of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. But then later I realized Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was not born out of immaculate conception. God creates this world. And God has made sex as a normal way of creating new lives. How can that be non-sacred? How can that be, inherently non-sacred? So these are some of the questions we have, for us. Indians also have some of these limitations. And it took people quite some time to accept the mother. And later on, of course, those who came into contact with the mother spent even 5 minutes with her. There are many, many cases where lives have been changed, completely changed. I'm not suggesting they immediately became angels or anything, but a new link was established between their innermost being and the divine, which of course they will follow this path life after life, and ultimately reach their fulfillment. The mother who was brought up in France, as you know, in early life, she pursued art. Basically, she was an artist, painter, a musician. Then, after some time, she took up occultism. She found a Jewish teacher called Theon, who was in Algiers. She went there, spent 2 years with him. He had a British or Irish wife called Thelma, and the husband and wife were very advanced occultists. They had, they knew how to leave the human body, and there are many sheaths, and so this lady, Thelma, was able to leave all the sheaths, and the spirit could go up and above and travel all over and come back again into the body. All these little secrets she had. And mother spent several years, 2 years in fact, studying all this occultism. Finally she met Paul Ricoeur, who was a great philosopher, a French philosopher, and they both came to India. In fact, Paul Ricoeur first came to India because he wanted to be an MP, member of the parliament, or whatever the French equivalent of it is, from Pondicherry. He came for election work. Of course, he was defeated in that election, but he met Sri Aurobindo, and he grew suddenly enthusiastic and wrote to his wife a long letter about this greatest man he had ever met in his life, and that was Sri Aurobindo himself. But in the meantime, the mother had already developed a inner contact with Sri Aurobindo. She used to get regular guidance from him. She used to see him in a vision, and he always used to come in a dhoti. Dhotis were not very widely known in those days, so she didn't know who this person was coming to her in a vision in a dhoti. Finally, when the mother came to Pondicherry, she met him, and it just took her a few seconds, minutes to realize that this was the person who was coming to her and advising her, guiding her, and so on. We don't want to go into all these details, but from 1926, when the mother said from now on she will be in charge of the ashram. Sri Aurobindo had a great hesitation in calling the place an ashram. He took 2 days to make up his mind. Shall we call an ashram? Because when you say an ashram, there are set notions. Ashram is a place where people don't shave. Ashram is a place where people don't wash their clothes. Ashram is a place where people don't cycle. Ashram is a place where people don't play tennis. All these notions are there. But, he wanted an equivalent of something called like a laboratory, a spiritual laboratory. There is no such term. So he said, all right, we'll settle down for ashram. So it was being called an ashram. And there, of course, as I told you the other day, I don't want to go into this, they regularly built what I describe as a human zoo. That's a place where people were selected not because they were saints, but people who had turned to the divine, but who had within them certain weaknesses, human weaknesses, which needed to be transformed, and Mother took them under her protection and worked on each one of them, and she must have succeeded a great deal. You see, it's always possible to make somebody behave in the way you like or want by threatening him. You say, tomorrow if you don't come wearing a turban, I will dismiss you. Of course, you will come in a turban because otherwise dismiss you. Or you can try to convince somebody by giving a long lecture. In this weather here, the foul British weather, it's good to have ears protected, head protected, so turban is better. That is another way. But there is a third way, which make man from within change, choose it voluntarily. And that's the way the Mother has been trying to change people, convert people, because for her, a member of the ashram was not just X. He represented one type of humanity, and if that man changed, all such people in the world had a chance to change. So Sri Aurobindo and the Mother built this ashram, started in 1926. There were, as I said, 26 people at that time. In fact, there is a list of these 26 people somewhere. Those who were present on the day Sri Aurobindo had what is called the Siddhi. And now, of course, it is something like 2,500 people. And very often people ask, who is now managing the ashram? I said, the divine is managing the ashram. There is no one else. And the activities just continue as ever before. And these 2,500 people, believe me, are not saints. Even if there are 2,500 saints, have you ever gone to a community of saints? They are very difficult people to manage. One saint is good enough for an ashram. 2,500 saints, it's difficult. So 2,500 people there living together without any human agency. In the ashram, as you see, there is no hierarchy. If we go there, we are not supposed to do pranams to anybody, we are not supposed to consult anybody, we are not supposed to take anybody's advice. Of course, human nature is, you always want a representative of God in front of you. You choose somebody as your guru or whatever. This is a human tendency we have, but Sri Aurobindo's yoga is in these matters so free, and he says you don't need an intermediary between you and the divine. And so there is no such formality. There is nobody says, what time did you get up today? Did you go to the samadhi? Did you do any meditation? None of these things asked. And nobody ticks you off just because you have taken eggs or you have eaten meat. None of these questions are asked. It's a matter, it's a personal matter. But in the ashram dining room, meat, etc. are not served because it simply is not economical to do that. And of course, for health reasons, more and more people are saying vegetarianism is the best kind of diet and so on. Besides this, what I am trying to say is it's a free approach, very difficult for people to understand, and the organization that the mother has, it's not for nothing that the mother was born in Europe, and the mother in her genes not only has the European culture, but he has also the culture of the Turkish, the medieval, not the medieval, the what is called the Islamic tradition, and also the African tradition. One of our forefathers came from Egypt. So from Egypt, Africa, the Middle East, and all that. And she came as a counterpart to Sri Aurobindo, because the one thing that we lacked a great deal, even today we lack, the national weakness is management. We are the most sheepish kind of people around. Management is something we somehow do not seem to appreciate or like. But the mother, the way she has arranged the ashram, the organized the ashram, is still a miracle. On any darshan day, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 people come, and the lunch or dinner everything is finished in 1.5 hours. No matter how many people come, the whole thing is organized in such a way. Every little detail has been taken care of, and the number of activities the ashram pursues are also innumerable. But more than anything else, I personally believe that mother's personality was so vast that very few people really did understand her. And many of you who have been associated with the ashram, who have been associated with Sri Aurobindo society and so on, I very often tell them that at one time Sri Aurobindo society and Auroville fell out. And the reason for it is not personality clashes, personality differences. This is only superficial. The main reason for it is our incomprehension of the mother. There is a European way of looking at the mother. There is an Indian way of looking at the mother. None of these is comprehensive enough. That is where we failed, and that is from where all of the cracks developed, and all this developed for some time. Of course, this is only a passing phase. I am absolutely sure they'll all come back together, because mother was not only the individual divine and the universal divine and the cosmic divine, but she was also an avatar. An avatar is not, as I pointed out the other day, doesn't come here to perform miracles. The avatar comes here to pay with his blood for our future. And that's exactly what the mother was doing. That the mother was transforming the cells of her body so that the new consciousness which has come down here can be received by a human body. Who can receive it? Who can do it? Sri Aurobindo himself tried to do it. As you know what the result was, he had to give up his body. He knew this. A body which is not ready and still receives this force. Sri Aurobindo told the mother, your body is more fit to undergo this experiment, not mine. If one of us has to go, I will go. It may be necessary for me to go. So the mother was doing this experiment. The experiment, the avatar is born here, but I have a feeling, by and large, we as Indians have failed to appreciate this aspect of mother's work. There is no doubt in our mind, that many of us have seen her as the Supreme Divine Mother. The Supreme Divine Mother, we have seen her as Adya Shakti, which the Europeans can't easily see because they don't have this concept. For her, the Christ-like mother is very easily understandable. And for us, the Christ-like mother is difficult to understand. That she came here to offer her body, to change her body, this is very, very difficult for us to understand. But for Europeans, that she, the Supreme Divine herself, come down in a human body, and nobody can foul up her program. The Divine's program, I don't think any human being can foul up. So how is it possible when people say that mother had such and such a thing in her mind, and then her associates didn't collaborate with this and everything got fouled up? How is it? Do you mean to say the Divine can't take care of these little details? It's the Divine. So I have in my mind no doubt about it at all, that if the Divine wanted it any other way, the Divine would have organized it, arranged it that way. So I basically therefore believe that mother's personality was so vast, so multidimensional. It is our failure to understand which reflected in the differences. And I have no doubt that those who want to build the Auroville and those who have been working for Auroville through society, both were absolutely sincere. I have absolutely no doubt about it. And yet, even when you are sincere, these things can happen because we have failed to rise to the demands of the mothers coming down here on earth. And this was to me our failure to understand the mother. All around there is this failure, and slowly, gradually, humanity will understand what she has left behind, the work that she has done, the transformation of the body that she was working at. This is something that maybe 50 years from now, 60 years from now, belief shall be not till the work is done. There is no point in my holding forth on this any longer. I just wanted to give you this background to say the mother came here. Her work was not to achieve anything for herself. Sri Aurobindo himself said, I don't want the supermind for me. I am not in quest of it for myself. I want it for the earth. I want it for humanity. And so whatever price I have to pay for it, I will pay it. I will pay it very happily. And he did. And as I said the other day, Sri Aurobindo's giving up the human body was no less a kind of a crucifixion than Christ's. Christ also gave up his body to establish in earth consciousness a new principle of consciousness called love. And Christ, in my judgment, civilized the whole of the West. And Sri Aurobindo also gave up his body exactly the same way in trying to bring down a new level of consciousness. And it was mother's work to make it sure that this new consciousness dwells on earth, so that firmly established on earth, so that even people like you and me who should be up and doing, trying to prepare ourselves to receive that, even if we, through laziness, through lack of commitment, because we are laggards, we took a couple of centuries, that consciousness will not disappear. This is what the mother has done. It has been firmly established on earth. And the process of the transformation of the human cells, that work also has advanced a great deal. And so this is the aspect of Savitri. This is what you see in Savitri, and not Savitri was born as a king's daughter. The mother was not born as a king's daughter. She was born as a banker's daughter, and so on. She was born an atheist. She didn't believe in God. She spoke French. She didn't speak. These things you don't have to see, but the inner significance of mother's life and the inner significance of Savitri here, these have to be seen, and you will see they are identical. So in one sense, therefore, when you talk about Savitri's yoga, all this is a background for Savitri's yoga. You have and then comes Mother's Yoga. It is very tempting to pause and say in what ways these yogas are different and so on, but I will not go into this exercise because that will further, hold us back and we won't go very far. What I want to do now is, this book of yoga is about 6-7 pages, 6-7 cantos, 7 cantos in fact. I will only take up 2 cantos for a quick review, because after that, there is book 8, in which Satyavan's death is described, but that's a very brief book. Book 8 has in fact only 1 canto, and that is Canto 3. Cantos 1 and 2 are missing, and Nirodvaran seems to assure Aurobindo, sir, we can't say Savitri is finished because there are 2 more cantos to be written. Oh, is that so? He said, that will have to be seen, he said. That we'll see some other day. So in one sense, therefore, there is no book 1 and book 2 Canto 1 and Canto 2 for book 8. If you have a copy, you can see it's only Canto 3 there. But I am not a yogi and a mystic and so on, so I have a very simple way of understanding it. And what is it? Even if you look at chronologically, the Canto 1 of book 1, describes the early dawn of the day on which Satyavan was to die. Canto 2 of book 1 describes the forenoon of the day on which Satyavan was to die. And Satyavan died around noon. So, for me, the missing cantos of 1 and 2 of book 8 are in fact the cantos 1 and 2 of book 1. If you put them there, you will find everything makes sense. So there are other ways of explaining it. I won't go into it because, they say all mantras have an irregular pattern. One of the significant things about a mantra, even Gayatri, Chandas, metrically Gayatri is slightly defective. That is the way mantras are made. So this Savitri book also being a mantra mandala, there has to be a little of this. 1/2 a matra has to be missing, and that is what you find missing in book 8, Canto 1 and 2 are missing. That is something we won't have to read, book 8. I'll just take it, announce here that this afternoon Satyavan passed away. That's all that you need to know. What comes afterwards, books 9, 10, 11. These are fantastic books, and we need to spend some time on these 3 books, giving you an idea of what great work Sri Aurobindo has done in several fields by writing these books. But before that, book 7, I would like to read 1 or 2 cantos, but that again in a hurry. The first thing I would like to do is read some sections from Canto 1, book 7. Now, the story here at this point is Savitri, as I said, goes back to her parents and tells her father that she had met Satyavan and she had chosen him for her life's companion. And as you know, Narad says that Satyavan is wonderful in every respect, but he had just 1 year to live. And then Savitri's mother's outburst. Savitri simply refuses to budge, change her position. And then Savitri's mother has this long dialogue with Narad, the meaning of pain, suffering and evil. And finally, when Narad has finished, Narad goes back and Savitri comes back to Satyavan's place, to a forest hermitage, and they live together. Now, in one sense, no young woman could have hoped for a better consummation than what Savitri has now found, because she has met Satyavan and now she is back with Satyavan, living with him, and there can't be any better place for a honeymoon than the forest verge in which Satyavan was living in a forest hermitage. That is true in one sense, and Sri Aurobindo describes that. But look at the mental condition of Savitri. Nobody knows. Satyavan doesn't know. Satyavan's parents don't know what Savitri knows. What is it? That Satyavan had just 1 year to live. So it's like Savitri's golden book of happiness has 365 pages. And each day that she wants to live is that page torn off from this book, and the book is getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And on one hand, this is a dream come true. She's living with her life's companion, with a chosen person, chosen by her heart. And on the other hand, every moment she lives with him brings her that much closer to the point of time when Satyavan must die. And this mental agony is shown most graphically in this canto. Savitri is not merely a book about, great people like Satyavan and Savitri and Ashwapati and so on. It is also an intense human drama. And in many ways, the yoga that you find here is a different kind of yoga. Very often people have a feeling yoga really consists of a set of exercises, a set of do's and don'ts. That constitutes yoga. Get up at 4:30. If you're in England, London, then you can make it little concession. 5:30 is okay, then get up. No need to take cold water bath, hot water will do. Then face east or northeast and so on. Sit down and hold your nose and do pranayam, and then after you have done that, then read 2 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita and sit down and do whatever, chanting this, that and the other. Make sure you don't eat onion and garlic and so on. If you do this, and do the same thing at night, that is what is generally considered yoga. Or, various practices. This is karma yoga, jnana yoga. People don't realize that yoga is primarily an attitude of your consciousness, of your being. What you are doing with your consciousness is more important than what you do outside. Many stories come to my mind. I very often tell my friends, look, all this, the philosophical things that I bring in, whether they maybe tire people out, sometimes they have great soporific effect. If the audience is vast, it can send people to sleep. So to make sure not all people sleep, I sometimes tell them little stories, so that again brings them back. And I have a little story which is quintessentially what tells you what yoga is all about. It's a very simple story. I must have told you here, I don't know. I go around telling the story, so I end up maybe telling the same story twice to the same audience. But it doesn't matter, what it's called repetition is a good technique of teaching. You must repeat things. Now, this I must have told you the story, I don't know whether I have, but in any case, most of you are new today. A long, long time ago, there used to be someone like me, just as I am today. And he began his life without any special advantages, in a kind of low-level job. And he said, no, I will make good in life. I will work very hard, and whoever gods there are, I will please them. With their blessings, I will prosper in life. It's all right. Now, he said, what do I do? Then he met a friend like Dhirubhai. Said, Dhirubhai, look, I have this problem. I want to prosper in life. What should I do? He said, very simple. Don't try to be ambitious. Daily spend half an hour doing the puja of Rama. These are the slokas to be chanted. This is the japa to be done. And then you do this arti, mangala arti, everything. Half an hour before you go to office. Is that all? That's all. I will do it. So, every day with great, interest regularly I do this half an hour's puja, and this goes on for about 5, 6, 7 years. Not even one promotion comes his way. This is what happened to Ramji. 6, 7 years I have done. Nothing comes my way. Then we get another friend, like our Vijan Bhai. He comes to our house. And I tell him, look Vijan Bhai, I have this problem. This friend of mine said you must worship Rama. I have been doing it. Is there anything wrong in what I am doing? You just tell me. Vijan Bhai says, no, it's not that you are doing something wrong, but Rama is a complicated God. You must choose a simpler God, who can be easily pleased. Who is that God? Shiva. Shiva, this is a Bhola. You start doing it and then you will find that within a couple of years your problems will be solved. I say, is that so? Yes. So I go out into the market and bring a little idol for doing puja. And now Rama is already there. Now what do I do with Rama? I can't just throw him out of the window. I have worshipped him for so many years. So I have to do Visarjanam. Visarjanam has to be done properly. That needs time. So what this man does is pushes Rama to a corner and installs Shiva there and does this whatever has to be done and starts the puja. But before he starts the puja, he has to light the agarbatti. So he lights the agarbatti. That morning, because of the direction of the wind, I don't know what it is, the fragrance, the smoke that comes out of the agarbatti, instead of going to Shiva, goes to Rama. Now this fellow says, what is this? This agarbatti is meant for Shiva and it is going to Rama. He doesn't know what to do. So he calls his son. You ask your mother to send some cotton wool. So he brings some cotton wool. So he takes this cotton wool, stuffs it in the nostrils of Rama's idol and says, look, this agarbatti is not meant for you, it's for Shiva. Now the story goes that at that moment, Rama, Sita and Lakshman and Hanuman, they all stand up in front of him and say to him, this is the first time you behaved as if we are really here. All these days you are doing puja. We were not here. Nor were you here. Your mind was somewhere else. This is for the first time you are doing a puja. Imagining that we are really here. That's the spirit behind all spiritual activities. If you can really bring this awareness of the presence of the Lord, this is called, cultivating the presence of the God. That is what you can do in the right spirit. Then everything that you do is yoga. As the mother once said, behave. You've seen all in the ashram kitchen and dining room, you said, what's it? Some of you remember it. Behave as if the mother was always looking at you, because she in fact is. Somebody said, no, it should be, maybe Sri Aurobindo's English needs correction. Not was, it were. Some devotee wrote to Sri Aurobindo, this professor of English has suggested this correction to your English. He says, no, if I say were, it means it is not real, but it's a kind of imposed reality. I don't mean that. I mean really the mother is looking at you. So start with the assumption the mother is looking at, not as if the mother were looking at you, but she is really looking at you. Now if this is the consciousness with which we do things, no matter what you do, it becomes yoga. And if this is the consciousness that is missing, no matter how rigorous and puristic your approach is, it's like the agarbatti. Instead of going to Shiva, it goes to Rama, it goes somewhere else. This is the heart of the spiritual approach. Very often we spend a lot of time reading, meditating, but our mind is going elsewhere. Now, if this is the yogic attitude, there is plenty in Sri Aurobindo's Ashwapati's yoga that can be regarded as quintessentially the yogic attitude. One of the things that I read out in the beginning, if you remember, always remember that things that happen to you from outside are not caused by outside agencies, outside causes. The cause for everything is inside you. It is the soul's need that determines the outside circumstances. We say, look at that, my life has absolutely no coherence. I was trying to do that, something else happened. It is not as if God doesn't know his job. It's simply because the outer happenings are in fact in response to the needs of your inner growth. That is one basic spiritual attitude. I'm saying this because in this canto, the mother, or Sri Aurobindo, is describing very beautifully how can grief comes to everybody. Failure, death, pain, these are inevitable. As long as you have a human life, these things do come to us. But one of the things one has to tell oneself, once one has turned to God, nothing happens to you without reason. It's not as if things happen to you randomly. Everything is measured to your needs, your inner requirements. And any circumstance can be used, can be turned to your spiritual advantage. Now here, the simple matter here is, Savitri has now to live with this terrible reality that her husband is going to live only for 1 year. For a woman, there can't be anything more calamitous than a news or certainty of this kind. We all have our own share of such painful experiences. What do? There are two things we tend to do. One is when one is singed, burnt by a painful, tragic experience. One tries to forget it by, let us say, going on a holiday. Oh, I want to forget it, let me go to Spain, let me go to Portugal, let me take a long holiday, forget everything, all this loss or whatever may happen. I will forget everything, I will be there for 6 weeks, have a nice time, go for a swim, eat all exotic foods, and relax and enjoy myself. I forget, you kind of immerse yourself in all comforts and indulgence and so on. You can forget this tragedy or unhappiness. You do this for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, for how long can you do it? You have to come back one day, and as soon as you come back, open the door, key, the door of your house, he is there. You are running away from me, how far can you go, how long can you run away from me, I am there. That's one way of trying to deal with these things, it fails. There is another way. The other way is, take up your work, whatever work you are doing, and bury yourself, as it were, into this work. 24 hours you do work. Somebody asked Bernard Shaw whether he was happy. He said, I am so busy, I don't even have time to think whether I am happy or unhappy. So similarly, you take up some work and put your heart and mind. Normally people work for 8 hours, you work for 12 hours, 14 hours. All my waking hours, I work. When I am dead tired, I go and sleep, so that I don't have this interval. When I think about my life, I don't want to think about my life. This is also another way people try to handle unhappiness of this kind. Both these are described here. Savitri wants to be buried, as it were, within the arms, the embrace of Satyavan. Whole day and night she wants to forget this fact that he is going to die. That's one way she tries. The other way she tries is be busying herself with all kinds of work so that she doesn't have time to think about any of these things. And really, finally, she finds that both these are not sure ways of handling the situation. There is a third way of doing it, which is the yogic way, the mother also talks about it. She says, whenever these things happen, don't run away from these things. Confront these. And start with the assumption that if the divine has given you this, there must be a purpose why he has given you this. More painful the experience, you can be sure greater is the divine's reason for giving you this. And if you start with this assumption, and if you begin to confront the tragedy or the unhappy situation, directly dealing with it, then it is very painful. Nobody should ever hope or aspire for any of these situations. But if you really are up to it, and if you engage your consciousness with this situation, then you will find suddenly your consciousness takes a spring. It just takes a jump from what it is to a much higher level, from which when you look down on your own life, the unhappiness that you were confronting suddenly seems a situation which doesn't affect you anymore. That's because your consciousness has taken a leap. All the things that happen to us in life are meant for the divine, meant by the divine, for you to utilize these circumstances for this purpose. But we go under. We don't know how to handle it. Now this yogic way of dealing with one's own pain is beautifully described in this canto. Now it is these things I regard as quintessentially yogic. How does one handle pain? How does one handle circumstances of great tragic consequence to an individual and so on, rather than whether you should read 18 chapters of the Gita or 12 chapters of the Gita or 10 chapters of the Gita. All these are very good, but the most important thing is how do you manage your own consciousness. Management of consciousness, one's own consciousness, is what yoga is all about. And yoga is being reborn. And one must realize birth of any kind is never without pain. All birth is attended by pain. But once the birth takes place, it's a new life. So the pain is worth the result that it brings forth. So this is a perception of Sri Aurobindo's which I find very, very beautiful, very, very beautifully handled here in this particular canto. I don't know how much I will be able to read because, as I said, all these take quite a while. I will start on page 468. You find there on page 468 a new section, beginning of a new section. At first, Savitri has gone back, has started living with Satyavan in the forest hermitage. At first, to her beneath the sapphire heavens, the sylvan solitude was a gorgeous dream. The beautiful surroundings, the greenery, the trees, the rivulets, the birds, the animals. It was like a gorgeous dream. She felt she was living in a dream world, in a fairy world, and again with the one person she loves. At first to her, beneath the sapphire heavens, the sylvan solitude was a gorgeous dream. An altar of the summer splendor and fire, a sky-topped, flower-hung palace of the gods, and all its scenes a smile on rapturous lips, and all its voices bards of happiness. He's talking about the birds there and the noise made by the flowing rivulets. This is what charmed Savitri, and she felt she was in a fairyland. There was a chanting in the casual wind. There was a glory in the least sunbeam. When do you feel a chanting in the casual wind? I'm sure everybody has felt this. When one is in love. When one is in love, one hardly walks on the earth. One walks at a level about 3 feet or 6 inches above the world, and suddenly finds the moon, the sunbeams are glorious, everything is glorious. There was a chanting in the casual wind. There was a glory in the least sunbeam. Night was a chrysoprase on velvet cloth, a nestling darkness or a moonlit deep. Day was a purple pageant and a hymn, a wave of the laughter of light from morn to eve. His absence, he's Satyavan, When Satyavan wasn't with her, a dream of memory, his presence was the empire of a god. When Satyavan was present, she felt she was enjoying the empire of a god. When for some reason he was not by her side, he was always present to her as if in a dream. A fusing of the joys of earth and heavens, a tremulous blaze of nuptial rapture past, a rushing of two spirits to be one, a burning of two bodies in one flame, opened were gates of unforgettable bliss, two lives were locked within an earthly heaven, and fate and grief fled from that fiery hour. There were moments when Savitri completely forgot that Satyavan was to be with her only for 1 year. All that just disappeared. But soon, now failed the summer's ardent breath. They got married at the beginning of summer. The summer ended, and throngs of blue-black clouds crept through the sky, and rain fled sobbing over the dripping leaves, and storm became the forest's titan voice. The beginning of the monsoon, rainy season had just beginning, and he describes it. Throngs of blue-black clouds crept through the sky, and rain fled sobbing over the dripping leaves, and storm became the forest's titan voice. Then listening to the thunder's fatal crash, and the fugitive pattering footsteps of the showers, and the long unsatisfied panting of the wind, and sorrow muttering in the sound-vexed night, the grief of all the world came near to her. Then, when she was all alone, when the storm was raging in the sky, the thunder and lightning, suddenly she remembered that all this glory that she was enjoying with Satyavan was going to end in less than a year's time. Night's darkness seemed her future's ominous face. The shadow of her lover's doom arose, and fear laid hands upon her mortal heart. Suddenly she felt this fear strangling her. The moment's swift and ruthless ray alarmed her thoughts. Her mind remembered Narad's date. Narad has given the date. This day returning, Satyavan must die. He doesn't say Satyavan will die, he always says Satyavan must die. Well, one could talk about why he says must. Satyavan must die so that Savitri confronts death in her life and conquers him. That is necessary. That's a necessity. This happened to her as a personal tragedy. Only when then she will be able to conquer that. We won't go into that. A trembling moved accountant of her riches. She reckoned the insufficient days between. Now she said, I have 365 days. How many days have I already spent? Oh, I have already been here in the ashram, in the hermitage, for 57 days. So how many days left? 365 minus 57. Only 308 days. It is less than 10 months. And all these things began to trouble her, torment her. A trembling moved accountant of her riches. She reckoned the insufficient days between. A dire expectancy knocked at her breast. Dreadful to her were the footsteps of the hours. Each morning, beginning of a new day to spend with the person she loves, but each morning reminding her one more page of the golden book of happiness has been torn off. And to that extent, this book is getting thinner and thinner. Grief came, a passionate stranger to her gate, banished when in his arms. When Savitri found she was in the arms of Satyavan, grief was banished. Banished when in his arms, out of her sleep, it rose at morn to look into her face. When she woke up in the morning, the first thing that she felt was staring at her was this fear of Satyavan's death. That disappeared when she was in Satyavan's bosom, in his embrace. But the night went by, and early morning she wakes up, the first thing she fears is this fear of Satyavan's death. Vainly she fled into abysms of bliss. So how did she want to find relief from this? By rushing into the abysms of bliss. From her pursuing foresight of the end, the more she plunged into love, that anguish grew. Her deepest grief from sweetest gulfs arose. Remembrance was a poignant pang. She felt each day a golden leaf torn cruelly out from her too slender book of love and joy. Thus swaying in strong gusts of happiness, and swimming in foreboding somber waves, and feeding sorrow and terror with her heart, for now they sat among her bosom's guests, or in her inner chamber paced apart. Her eyes stared blind into the future's night. All this is what I call Savitri's Vishada Yoga. There is something called Arjun's Vishada Yoga in the Gita. The very first chapter is the Vishada Yoga. You know, and notice the wisdom of our tradition. Vishada is never just Vishada. Vishada can be converted into yoga. Therefore, it can be Vishada Yoga. You see, it is up to us. Vishada comes, whether you are an ordinary human being or a yogi or whoever, as long as you are human, Vishada, these phases of Vishada come. Some people get over it. After some time you become used to it, accustomed to it, and time heals all wounds. Again, next time there will be another wound, you will face with it and get over it, and again like that you face life. But some people are capable of turning this into yoga. The Vishada becomes the beginning of a new life for them. Vishada Yoga, this is what has happened to Savitri. And Savitri's Vishada Yoga is what I want you to see in this canto. But as I said, if we do it in any great detail, we won't have enough time to complete what I want to do today. But please, when you have time, look at it from this point of view. She says at one point on page 471, after all was given, both page 471, about 5-6 lines from the bottom, after all was given, she demanded still, even by his strong embrace unsatisfied, she longed to cry, O tender Satyavan, O lover of my soul, give more of love, while yet thou canst. To her thou lovest. Imprint thyself for every nerve to keep, that thrills to thee the message of my heart. For soon we part, and who shall know how long before the great wheel, in its monstrous round, restore us to each other and our love. This is what she felt when she is Satyavan. Something from her silently prays to Satyavan. Oh Satyavan, take me closer and closer to you. Because we don't know, once this spell of nearness is broken, we don't know when we will come together again. That's the kind of pathetic grief that Savitri is possessed of. And he says, too well she loved to speak a fateful word, and lay her burden on his happy head. She pressed the outsurging grief back into her breast, to dwell within silent, unhelped, alone. But Satyavan sometimes half understood, but poor Satyavan doesn't know that he is going to die so soon. So he doesn't know why, it's when they are together, close together, she's so tense. Why she is so tense, he can't understand. But Satyavan sometimes half understood, or felt at least with the uncertain answer of our thought-blinded hearts the unuttered need, the unplumbed abyss of our deep passionate want, and so on. The whole canto, is a beautiful description. She says the same, page 472, she dwelt like a dumb priest with hidden gods, unappeased by the wordless offering of her days, lifting to them her sorrow like frankincense, her life the altar, herself the sacrifice. Yet ever they grew into each other more, until it seemed no power could rend apart, since even the body's walls could not divide. For oft, so beautifully explained, when she wandered in the forest oft, her conscious spirit walked with him and knew his actions as if in herself he moved. The idea here is, Satyavan used to go to forest every morning to collect firewood, to collect fruit, roots, etc. And would be away for 4 or 5 hours at a time. But Savitri had taken her love so seriously as a yoga that she had already started being with Satyavan in her subtle body. She was in the ashram, but she knew exactly where Satyavan was in the forest. How would she know? Because her identity with Satyavan had become so intimate that although physically she was in the ashram, maybe sweeping the floor or fetching the water from the pond, in her subtle body, she was there with Satyavan, going wherever he went. That was the siddhi she had already achieved by this intense identification with Satyavan. That's what the poet is telling us. For when he wandered in the forest oft, her conscious spirit walked with him and knew his actions as if in herself he moved. As if Satyavan's movement in the forest was not in the forest, but in the being of Savitri. That is how she enveloped, her consciousness enveloped Satyavan wherever he went. He, less aware, thrilled with her from afar. Always the stature of her passion grew. Grief, fear became the food of mighty love. Increased by its torment, it filled the whole world. It was all her life, because her whole earth and heaven, although life-born and infant of the hours, immortal it walked unslayable as the gods. Her spirit stretched measureless in strength divine, an anvil for the blows of fate and time, or tired of sorrow's passionate luxury. Grief's self became calm, dull-eyed, resolute, awaiting some issue of its fiery struggle, some deed in which it might forever cease, victorious over itself and death and tears. Slowly, gradually, as they were approaching the end of that year, Savitri began to get complete control over her grief. She became very resolute. She decided not to run away from this grief, but tackle with it in her own way, confront it in her own way, victorious over itself and death and kings. The year now paused upon the brink of change. No more the storm sailed with stupendous wings, and thunder strode in wrath across the world, but still was heard a muttering in the sky, and rain dripped wearily through the mournful air, and grew slow drifting clouds shut in the earth. Now, one of the reasons I spend so much time looking at what looks like the most unspiritual parts of this epic is that to convince my readers that this is primarily a human drama. There is enough human sentiment here. We don't have, one of the reasons why you read Mahabharata is that it is pulsating with the human drama. So Savitri, although it is mantric in its effect, it kind of expresses the highest spiritual truths. It does not lack in human drama, it doesn't lack in human warmth and human passion. All these things are described in great detail. Remember, I spent some time talking about how Savitri and Satyavan meet, what happens to them, how Sri Aurobindo takes great pain in expressing what Savitri felt when she first saw Satyavan, what Satyavan felt when she first saw Savitri. All this is a part of the human drama that is described here, and this is for many people the most insignificant part of the whole epic, which is how did Savitri spend the first year after marriage. But I find that even here there is a great deal of spiritual wealth Sri Aurobindo has squandered, and only those who have time to apply themselves and drink deep at this fountain can see how much Sri Aurobindo has given. Now the next cantos 2, 3, etc. are all talking about Savitri's inner yoga. In the original Mahabharata story, uh, there is a description of what is called a Triratra Vrata. Just as Ashwapati performs a yajna which lasts for 18 years, and the devata of this yajna is Savitri herself, goddess Savitri, and what he wants as a boon from this goddess is a child, son or a daughter, but mostly son, but God decides to give him a daughter and not a son. That's a different question. Here, in Savitri's own life, just 2-3 days before Satyavan's day arrives, on the day which Narad had predicted Satyavan is going to die, Savitri performs a very strict, austere vrata. It's called Triratra Vrata, 3 days and 3 nights. She doesn't take any food and she doesn't even move from one place. She stands like a tree in one place. I don't know what kind of vrata that is. Now, Sri Aurobindo takes the hint of this story and converts it into Savitri's yoga. Just as Ashwapati's yajna is converted as Ashwapati's yoga, and I describe the scope of Ashwapati's yoga, similarly Savitri's Triratra Vrata is described by Sri Aurobindo as Savitri's yoga. It goes on for about 100 pages. I describe the first introductory part, the 1 year that Savitri spends with Satyavan. Then Savitri's inner life is described. In Savitri's yoga, Satyavan's yoga is primarily a yoga of exploration, the yoga of ascent. Savitri reaches more or less the same result, but she has another focus. Her focus is to bring down the divine power, so that she needs this power to confront the god of death. Ashwapati has to go up so that he can discover the new creative power called the supermind. He has to discover it. Now the job of bringing it down in all its entirety is primarily Savitri's work. So Savitri's yoga consists not only of going up, but also bringing that power down. Of course, Ashwapati also brought it down in the sense the Divine Mother says, I will send an emanation from me as your daughter. That is the coming down. But in Savitri's case, the coming down of Yoga Siddhi is actually the new power descends into Savitri's being. Later on, as we will see, the god of death and Savitri have confrontation. And at one point, the god of death says to Savitri at the end of about 100 pages, Savitri, I have tried to argue against you from all possible philosophical positions, and you have made me speechless. I do admit that you have the strongest of cases, but arguments don't win anything except in a court of law. But in life, what wins is power. Do you have the power? I am quite convinced man has to go beyond his present level of consciousness. But how can it be done? It requires a power. Do you have the power to do it? Show me that power. Then he says, only then will I accept what you are asking. Only then will I release Satyavan from my hold. And at that point, Savitri stands there like Krishna in the Gita, showing her Vishwarup, showing her original form. And Yama sees the Supreme Mother herself in Savitri. And a light emanates from Savitri's body and completely, it doesn't destroy the god of death, because in Sri Aurobindo nothing is destroyed, but the god of death is transformed by this light. We'll talk about it later. This yoga that we are going to read about basically talks about this Triratra Vrata, or this yoga of Savitri, which makes her realize who she really is. She realizes she is no more just Satyavan's wife, she is no more just Ashwapati's daughter, she is the Supreme Mother herself. In other words, the primary objective of all yoga is to make us realize who we are. We think we are what we are, our body, our mind, or whatever. But what we really are the children of immortality. I think we'll stop here and take up another canto from this book. Tomorrow it will be Canto 4.